As we all know, the pandemic has thrown into stark relief everyday ethical dilemmas that we face and has shone a spotlight on the radical inequalities of our society at both a national and a global level. Most people agree that we must protect the most vulnerable, but who are the vulnerable? Older people and people with underlying health conditions, but also essential workers at the front line, bus drivers, shop workers, care workers, who are also often the most underpaid people in our society. There are also people suffering in cramped housing and with no outside space. And there are women suffering increased levels of domestic violence. So how do we weigh up the value of different human lives? Do we just have to accept the suffering of a few to save the lives of many? Or is that an obscene question? With us to discuss these major issues are Susan Neiman, philosopher and director of the Einstein Forum in Potsdam. Her most recent book is called Learning from the Germans, Race and the Memory of Evil, which explores the lessons the US could learn from Germany in coming to terms with its terrible legacy. Then we have Patricia Churchland, Professor of Philosophy Emerita at the University of California, San Diego, who is well known for her work on mind, morality, and who instituted the idea of neurophilosophy. Her most recent book is called Conscience. And finally, we are joined by Peter Hitchens, a journalist, author, and broadcaster, author of books such as The Abolition of Britain and The Abolition of Liberty. He writes at the moment for the Mail on Sunday. Well, I now am going to open this debate up and ask each speaker to give us their thoughts on the debate, and in particular to ask their views on the question, is morality inherently selfish? So I'll begin, if I may, with you, Susan.
Morality is exactly what we need when other things clash with our self-interest. Morality is exactly what self-interest is relatively simple. You have to do some instrumental reasoning sometimes to figure out what's in your self-interest and the best way to go about getting the shortest means to the ends that you want. But that's not a serious or philosophical problem. Philosophical problems arise when something that's in your self-interest isn't in someone else's, and you need to weigh things. I mean, the basic answer to the question, is morality ultimately selfish, is no. But what I've been thinking about since the pandemic started is actually that the entire very long discussion about self-interest and the common good is actually being undermined in a quite promising and beautiful way. And one example, of course, is just what we're all being told about wearing masks. We're wearing masks not to protect ourselves, but to protect other people. And if they wear masks, it will protect us. I mean, that's just a rock bottom level and perhaps a paradigm, but also what you mentioned at the beginning, our realization that not only are grocery store workers and trash collectors and nurses the most vulnerable and usually the worst paid, they're also the most important. All of us who get to stay at home and work online and jabber in conversations like this or file our stories are non-essential. The world will go on turning without us. And I think there's been enough consciousness of that and discussion of that all over the world that people are beginning to ask, it is not an act of generosity to make sure that those people who keep our worlds going are given the same kinds of, or better, working conditions, pay, status, and respect than they have hitherto received, because the world will not go on turning if it doesn't happen that way.
Thank you very much. Patricia, can I ask you to answer the same question?
Well, I'll give it a shot, and I'm going to come at it from a rather different direction. I'm going to start with the question that Darwin asked in The Descent of Man in 1871. And Darwin knew very well, of course, that mammals and birds generally are intensely social. So Darwin said, where does our moral sense or our conscience come from? And he suggested that it had three components. One is instinct, one is learning, and the third is what we might call problem solving or reasoning. Now, by and large, evolutionary biologists have been disinclined to think that instinct could be any part of the story, because they think, well, gee, you know, if some person had the instinct to be altruistic, then the other guys would take advantage of him, he wouldn't be able to reproduce, and it would be wiped out. But it turns out that there is an interesting story about why mammals and birds are social in the way that they are. So about 200 million years ago, warm-blooded animals appeared on the planet. Now, this was a tremendous ecological advantage because they could forage at night and they could forage in cooler places. But it came with a huge cost. Gram for gram, a warm-blooded animal has to eat 10 times as much. So in order to accommodate that, those animals, warm-blooded, were favored if they were smart, and the smarter the better. Now, there's really two ways to get smart. One is to build it all in the genes, but that's an extremely long and slow process. The other way is to learn. And the bigger the learning, the smarter you are. And so what really happened then was that big learning took place. But the downside, the cost of big learning, is because the brain has to build structure every time you learn anything. Infants have to be born very immature. And that means they are very vulnerable. So those animals were favored where the parents, or in particular the mother, formed strong bonds to the infant and cared for the infant as though it was an extension of herself, that she took care of its food, its warmth, and its safety. Now, it wasn't because it was fun, it was because she was wired to do this. And we now know something about the neurochemicals that are involved in that. And they have to do with oxytocin and the neurochemicals that make you feel really good, the endocannabinoids. Now, as species traveled the planet and found additional niches, different manners and ways of being social emerged. Some animals found it very convenient to live in fairly large groups. Some animals found that pair bond, long-term pair bonding, was an ecological advantage. Others didn't have pair bonding, but there was bonding between kin, bonding between friends, and so forth. So if I can put it in a very simple way, but first I should make one clarification. By a moral decision here, I'm going to mean a decision in which I incur a cost in order to benefit another. So in the case of many social animals, what we see is that there is significant caring for others. It's as though, to put it in a very highly simplified way, and I'm sure, I'll get beaten up for this, it's as though bonding begets caring and caring begets morality. And we see aspects of caring for others in all of the intensely social animals, such as wolves, elephants, baboons, and certainly also in humans. Now, the learning part of what Darwin picked up on involves the reward system. So very early on, the infants learn how to navigate their social world, but their reward system is deeply involved, so that when they produce a behavior that is rewarded, they feel good, they get a dopamine hit. When they produce behavior for which they are scolded, they get a serotonin hit, to put it simply. And so it does mean, and I know some Kantians think that this is horrifying, it does mean that we often take real pleasure in doing the right thing, in doing the good thing. We derive satisfaction and joy and pleasure from doing that. We also know that if you are a social animal and you behave in these socially caring ways, that it's good not only for your mental health, it's also very good for your physical health. It doesn't precisely imply anything about policy. For that, I think we have to figure out things in the way we always have. We have to come together, compromise, make decisions, do the best we can. And by and large, with the exception of psychopaths, people tend to want to do that. That they have common sense, basically they are decent, and when there is an emergency, people respond very well. They do respond in different ways because we are different from one another. And that reflects our cultural background, but it also reflects certain deep, innate characterological features, such as whether we are very inclined to be rule-bound or whether we are inclined to be rule breakers. And there's really important data about that. But this is just by way of saying that the mix is very complex. And there is no simple rule that tells us what the right thing to do is.
Okay, thank you very much. And now finally I turn to Peter.
Morality seems to me to be tested most of all in the overcoming of fear.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.